Isambard Kingdom Brunel, civil engineer. Sounds quite a straightforward occupation for a gifted person, but it's been very dangerous for Isambard Kingdom Brunel. He had a near escape from drowning when boring the Thames tunnel beneath the river. So he was very ill and injured for about 3 months, 1827. Then the next catastrophe to strike his health was here, because he was leaving London on the brand new, newly fitted out Great Western ship, and he was steaming down the River Thames here, eastward to the North Sea on the 31st of March 1838, and about 8:30 in the morning there was a fire in the engine room, and Brunel went down into the engine room on a wooden ladder which was badly charred by the fire, and he fell 18 feet, but his fall was broken after 18 feet by falling on top of his friend Captain Christopher Claxton, whose presence would have saved his life. He'd hurt his back, left foot, and he was widely bruised. And on the 1st of April, he was brought here into Hole Haven, Canvey Island, Essex, for about 6 days convalescing here in this inn. It was called, in his day, probably the World's End, because it had a rename in the 1700s. It was built in that era after replacing a similar pub on the same site, which was here in 1600. So the World's End, I don't know when it became the Lobster Smack, but Brunel was here convalescing. He writes in his diary that he was recovering in an inn on a little island in the River Thames, which is Canvey Island, and we're told he was landed at Hole Haven, so he had to have been convalescing here. It would have made great sense for him to be moved as least amount as possible, and you can see the distance from the edge of the inlet to the inn is minimal. One author called Maggs stated that Brunel was convalescing on a farm, while on the pub notice board they mentioned Sluice Farm being only a few metres down the road. But in Brunel's own words, he was here. And he was taken to London on the 7th of April. And when you're here and you look at the geography and you realise the man was in great pain with a bad back, he wasn't going to be bouncing up and down in a carriage. He was going to be floated upriver to London. And this is another example of touching Brunel history. I managed to get here early in the morning, so we've got no cars, and the environment is as close as possible to what is in Brunel's time. I think this is a great story. It's not directly linked to engineering or Brunel's design. This is about the risk and the dangers that he suffered in life to be a civil engineer.